Hi, welcome to Why Your Agile Project Failed, Learning to Succeed, a discussion about letting bad news point toward good outcomes. Thanks for coming. Before we start talking about projects, I want to share some information about myself and set some parameters for this talk. If you have questions throughout the presentation, go ahead and drop them into chat. I'll try to acknowledge them as I notice, but there will also be an opportunity to ask questions at the end if I miss anything or you have other questions. My name is Sean Frost, and I've been an Agile developer since 1999 when the consultancy I worked at caught me making GeoCities pages when I should have been bothering developers for timesheets. I learned how to code on the job, pairing with experienced developers who taught me the ways of object-oriented design and extreme programming. Over my career, I've seen Agile projects succeed, fail, and land somewhere in between. Often the same projects were all three, depending on who you asked. More on that later. I am non-binary, which I only mention because I would appreciate it if you use they, them pronouns when talking to others about this presentation. Thanks in advance. Also, I like cats. Cats are great, even when they wake you up at 3 a.m. just to get scritches. I love them, but I have shut them out of the room for this presentation because I know their ways. Let's talk about failure. Different studies have put forth conflicting data about the frequency of software project failures. 61%, 75%, up to 90% for large software projects. The only commonality seems to be that it's over half of them. Why is there so little consensus? Part of it is in what they're looking for. What is failure? Was there some positive outcome, or was it an absolute waste of time, money, and effort? At what point does a partial success become a failure? And moreover, could the failure have been worse? I've listed here some of the reported indicators of failure. Running out of money seems bad. I assume that's just allocated funds, not company bankruptcy. I hope that's the majority anyway. The implication is that the project was not left in a shippable state. Incomplete scope feels related. Depending on what requirements were finished, the code could still provide value. I'm guessing here that the unfinished work was necessary. Missed the date. Ooh, if the date was vital, then going over is certainly a failure. The application not running reliably or at all, that's pretty bad, especially if it can't be corrected quickly. Oh, that users don't use it is certainly a mark of failure. But can we use these to define success? Let's try the opposite of failure. So a successful project is on time, within budget, with all the requested features, all requirements were gathered and perfectly captured. There's 100% uptime and 0 bugs. Users love it. Adoption is high. No wonder the failure rates are so high. Maybe there's a more lenient definition of success. One thing you can see in the reported failures is how some of them could be ameliorated by adaptive planning. By that, I mean that the work should be organized to favor releasability over completeness. It's an approach called minimum viable product, or MVP. If that's a new term for you, I urge you to look it up and read more about it. Um, it is the goal of this presentation to talk about how to make sure that you get to MVP, not to help you determine what MVP is. For now, the important thing is to know that an MVP represents the least amount of functionality essential to providing value. If you organize the work to focus on the MVP, then you can more readily adapt to changing conditions, such as budget cuts, time pressure, newly discovered requirements, findings from user testing. In other words, a lot of the failure causes that we saw above. A partial success that provides value is preferable to total failure. So, for this discussion, let's define success and failure in terms of whether MVP was achieved. So you've tried Agile and worked toward an MVP, but your project still failed. Why? There's a pat answer offered by some in the Agile community. You didn't do Agile right. That's super not helpful and really doesn't point to what you may have done wrong, what may have happened during the course of your project that you could have turned around. So let's look at what people report as causes industry-wide. Bad management. Well, that's about as helpful as didn't Agile correctly. What does that even mean? A lot of these are tightly coupled to the descriptions of failure without offering any insight. We missed the target date because it was unrealistic. Well, what was unrealistic about it? How can you do better next time? We didn't implement requirements we didn't know about. Well, okay, so how could you have found them out? User testing. Um, Here's a couple more interesting causes: lack of trust, miscommunication, conflicting goals. These are things we can explore and learn from. Why are these important? What do they look like? How do we improve them? To answer that, let's look at a few projects I've been on over the years. So we have, as you can see, there's a blockage here. I'll explain that. Over a decade ago, I was working for a company that wanted to introduce limited free access to their subscription site. They wanted to allow users to create an account and view a small number of articles every month. To accomplish this, the work stream was assigned to an Agile team under a product owner who was responsible for the functionality. But because this work was assumed to not require the full team, two more product owners were added to the project, each with their own slate of upgrades and enhancements to the site. We also had an architect who did not work in the same office as any of the development team or product owners. He had particular expectations about testing an external service for use in our overall solution. If you have spidey senses going off, you have excellent instincts. One developer was given the task of completing the main work, and the remainder of us were given work by the other two POs. Already, our balance is weighed against completing our highest priority. As that developer floundered, the work remained their sole responsibility, and the rest of us were kept doing less vital chores and tasks. For a few retros, we brought up concerns about the lack of progress in our main deliverable, but nothing ever changed. After that, most team members stopped bringing up anything of substance. Eventually, we hit the point where it was clear that we would not make the date using the technology requested. No one could reach the architect, but the PO approved pivoting to whatever would get the work done. And the work got done on time even. But the architect got deployment canceled so that we could rewrite it the way he wanted. Over the next month, we worked together to meet this requirement. And yes, added a few more small fixes for the other two POs. So in the end, we were late and over budget, but we got the work done. A qualified success that by some metrics could be considered a failure. Could we have done better? Absolutely. With focused purpose, clear ownership, and more collaboration, we could have completed the primary objectives early, making it easier to negotiate what could be left for follow-on work after the planned release date. About 5 years ago, I was brought into a project that was building the third version of a company's consumer website. The second version had never launched, literally. The contracted delivery team had handed over an application that couldn't even start. With test coverage of over 90%, they were incredulous that the code was so broken. On examination, the client discovered that while the automated tests were extensive, they did not contain a single assertion. Understandably, this left the client with some trust issues. The company I was working for had begun work on the new effort with a small team, and having won a little trust, we're expanding to a second. We were doing well at that size for a few months, but the client wanted to increase our output. My company agreed, and very quickly we ramped up to 6 teams, each with its own client PO and PM, representing 3 different client divisions. Things unraveled quickly. With pressure from their bosses, several of the PMs started pitting the teams against each other, comparing velocities that were based on different work and estimates. My team looked good in these comparisons, but our velocity was deceptive. Yes, we were racking up story points, but we weren't doing anything meaningful. Our PO fed us a constant stream of busy work that didn't address anything needed for MVP. That's because with 6 teams, the client couldn't provide stories quickly enough for all of us. Meanwhile, other teams had important work that was difficult to accomplish. They needed help, but the client project leaders were working at cross purposes and weren't helping each other. Working under close supervision, we were only able to offer help with brainstorming. We weren't able to take on supporting work. Worse, once high-level talks started happening between our consultancy and the client company, it was discovered that some of the team leaders had been reporting project status that was far more rosy than the reality. The relationship collapsed, and the client took what had been produced to another shop to finish. A few months later, they came back because that company wasn't working out, but we had to turn them down. Most of us had been reallocated, and the remainder quit rather than work for them again. Our teams didn't trust the client anymore. Distrust, poorly defined goals, lack of collaboration, pointless busy work, and internal rivalries led to a project failure almost unrivaled in my career. I joined Integral a little under 2 years ago and was placed on a project for a large corporation. We were making a credit application site to hook into several pieces being assembled for an online sales flow as part of an anticipated product launch. With that last experience fresh in my mind still, I was a little leery about the large team size and the complexity of building a puzzle piece that needed to fit with other pieces that were still being constructed. And it was quite a challenge. Several client projects being built by a mixture of client teams, contractors, and consultancies, trying to build against each other's evolving interfaces and adapt to new discoveries, all on a tight deadline. We stayed in touch, not only with our main client contact, but with other teams as well. When applications sending us data and receiving data from us disagreed, we got them together to all discuss their needs and find a solution. When high level client leadership asked for an accounting of status, we were honest about where we were slipping and what help we needed. Internally, we held code review sessions, not to check each other's code, but to keep our large team aligned. We fine-tuned our pair rotation to allow for enough time to be able to complete short stories together while also ensuring that we became more familiar with each other and worked in many areas of the code. In short, we communicated openly and honestly, and the other teams and project managers responded to us in kind. It sounds easy, but it was a lot of work. We completed our MVP early enough that we could help other teams chase bugs through the integrated systems, supporting the project as a whole and not just our piece of it. When the full thing launched in production, there were very few problems, and we were able to resolve them quickly. It was a great feeling. Communication is good, not just talking to each other, not just having regular meetings, being honest, raising risks, providing alternatives, asking for help, whether that's input, resources, or decisions. One of our core values at Integral is kindness. It feels good to tell clients what they want to hear, that everything's going to be delivered, but that won't help them achieve their goals. Kindness is keeping them informed of the truth, not in a cruel way, but to allow them the opportunity to correct course while there's still time. Another of our values is accountability. Each project is different. We estimate based on our experience, but that doesn't always match the reality of our current situation. No one likes to say they were wrong, but when we are, we need to own it as quickly as possible so that the client can make adjustments. The last one is humility, which you need to have to be kind and accountable. Being confident enough to offer your thoughts, but humble enough to listen to others. to speak your mind and admit your mistakes. That's the kind of balance you need to effectively collaborate. And with that level of communication throughout the organization, you can remove all of the failures that center on misalignment and focus on defining and delivering an MVP. I'm going to go off script here for a second because I need to go back to the first example, the limited free access. We missed our opportunities because we stopped trusting that we were being listened to. So we stopped saying anything. The developer that was trying to do the unworkable stayed floundering on their own because they didn't think that anyone cared or would help. We stopped trying to get them help because no one seemed to listen to us. We couldn't get the architect on the horn. Don't know why. So communication and trust and honesty were all pretty broken there. And at the end of that project, we had a retro to go over what went well and what didn't go so well over the course of the project. And after listening to 40 minutes of people citing minor things and celebrating small wins, but not hearing anybody talk about what we could have done, what we should have noticed, I finally found my voice. But it was a voice of frustration, not of kindness. And instead of calmly and kindly bringing up all of the opportunities we had, how maybe next time we should focus on the first priority, maybe all of us work on that together until that's taken care of, I rather angrily said, how did anybody expect that this would work? I might have had a little more volume. And then I unloaded all of my thoughts. The room was shocked. It got their attention. They listened. I never saw that problem again. But my career there was over, and justly so, because that was a lot of blame and that was a lot of hostility instead of acknowledging all of our parts, mine included, in having allowed this to happen and looking toward, in a blameless way, how to move forward and do better the next time. So honesty is not always, honesty is good. Kindness is what you need to relate that honesty in an effective way. So Agile provides many opportunities to communicate kindly to different levels on a regular cadence. Daily stand-ups, planning sessions, demos, retros. There are many ceremonies at which concerns or difficulties may be raised, but you have to have the kindness, accountability, and humility to actually use these meetings effectively. And while your cadence ensures that you have regular opportunities for communication, you should always take initiative to raise big issues as soon as it is possible. If you are in an environment driven by fear and mistrust, where people do not feel like they can speak honestly, it's probably not your methodology that's keeping you from gathering all of the proper requirements, planning and scheduling your work effectively, or meeting costs and deadlines. So, what can you do if your organization isn't communicating well? First, do not surrender to hopelessness. It can take time, no matter your position or influence, to help people come around. Concentrate on those you interact with most directly and measure the change you can see in them. Be an exemplar of the trust and vulnerability that you want to foster. It feels risky, especially if your workplace doesn't yet encourage open communication. Trust doesn't just happen, but the more you demonstrate it, the more that others may reciprocate. Reassure your team that it's okay to be wrong, to toss out ideas for consideration, to ask for help, and show them through your actions that it's true. If enough of your team, including leadership and management, demonstrate kindness, accountability, and humility in frequent communication, the chance of your project's success is much greater. One more thing, be easy on yourself. You're a single person, no matter your role. It's your responsibility as part of a team to do your best. But it's not your fault if the environment is one based on fear and punishment. Just do your best to show another way. If you're interested in more in-depth discussion on this subject or anything else, software or team related, I welcome you to take advantage of our pro bono office hours. It's a 60-minute session where we do a deep dive into a problem you're looking to solve and help frame up some solutions together. Let's nerd out. Shoot an email to hello@integral.io to set it up.